Telestuanat, welcome, dear listeners, to a journey through the heart of the Brazilian sertão. Today I'm going to tell you a story that happened more than 140 years ago, but resonates in our hearts as if it were yesterday. It's the story of Maria Lúcia and José Antonio, two souls who found each other in the arid sertão of Bahia, where love flourished even under the relentless sun of drought. A narrative about overcoming, generosity, and the transformative power of true love. A teacher who arrived carrying only a leather suitcase and a dream, and a widowed farmer who had lost hope along with the rains. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? What's your city? I love knowing where the hearts that connect with these stories come from. And go ahead and leave your like and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any of these narratives that warm the soul. The story of Maria Lúcia and José Antonio. Year 1881. Location, Vila de São Bento, Sertão of Bahia. The vapor rising from the earth still carried the acrid smell of the drought that had punished the sertão 3 years before. Maria Lúcia Pereira felt that penetrating aroma when she descended from the ox cart in the square of Vila de São Bento, her cotton skirts already dusty from the long journey from Diamantina. She carried only a worn leather suitcase, a missal with faded golden edges, and a determination that shone in her brown eyes like clean water on a day of drought. At 28 years old, she had learned that life doesn't promise ease, only opportunities disguised as challenges. At Dona Benedita's store, while drinking fresh water from the clay pot and feeling the coolness run down her parched throat, she heard for the first time the name that would change her destiny, José Antonio Ferreira. That man lost his joy along with the deceased, murmured Dona Benedita, wiping her hands on her apron. Since Conceição passed away in childbirth, there at Santa Rita Farm, he's not the same anymore. He became like a wild animal, only speaks when necessary. Maria Lúcia adjusted the shawl over her shoulders and felt a pang in her chest, as if recognizing in another's pain an echo of her own anguish. She had left behind in Minas Gerais not just a city, but also the shame of being considered an incomplete woman, words that still echoed in her mind like stones thrown into a dry well. The bell of São Bento's chapel rang the evening prayers, and Maria Lúcia raised her eyes to the sky that was beginning to take on orange tones. It would be here, in this land of simple people with open hearts, that she would try to rebuild not just a career as a teacher, but her own shattered soul. She didn't yet know that a few kilometers away, under the same sky that turned red that evening, a man was watching the sunset from the porch of his big house, wondering if he would ever again feel hope flow through his veins, like the water that sprang from the farm's well. The ox cart got stuck in the dry mud near the village fountain on a morning that promised suffocating heat. Maria Lúcia was trying to push the stubborn wheel when a shadow projected beside her, followed by the gentle stepping of hooves on the beaten earth. José Antonio Ferreira dismounted from his bay horse with measured movements, like someone who doesn't waste energy on unnecessary gestures. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders molded by farm work, with well-trimmed beard and eyes that carried the color of the sky before a storm. "You need help," he said, not as a question but as a simple observation from someone who sees what needs to be done. Maria Lúcia raised her face, feeling some strands of hair stick to her forehead damp with sweat. "I'm the new teacher, Maria Lúcia Pereira." She extended her gloved hand, a gesture he accepted with the respectful brevity of men from the sertão. "José Antonio," he replied, approaching the cart. With an ease that spoke of muscles accustomed to heavy work, he freed the wheel from the rut. Other village residents approached curiously. The arrival of a teacher was a rare event. Maria Lúcia felt the evaluating gazes and straightened her shoulders. "I came to teach the first letters and the 4 operations," she announced, addressing both José Antonio and the others. "I intend to bring teaching to the farms and ranches as well." José Antonio studied her in silence for a moment that seemed eternal. There was something in that woman's posture, a silent dignity, a contained strength, that awakened in him a curiosity long dormant. "In the sertão," he finally said, "whoever teaches with truth always finds someone who needs to learn. But the distances are long and the sun doesn't forgive. I've already learned that the sun only punishes those who don't have a firm purpose," Maria Lúcia replied, adjusting the books in the cart. For a fleeting instant, something that could have been the outline of a smile touched José Antonio's lips. He mounted his horse, touched the brim of his hat in a silent farewell, and continued on his way, leaving behind only the echo of hooves on the earth and a teacher who felt, for the first time since arriving in the Sertão, that perhaps she had found someone who understood the language of wounded hearts. But would this be the only time they would meet, or was destiny weaving other plans for those two solitary souls? Father Francisco found Maria Lucia kneeling in São Bento's chapel on a Tuesday afternoon, when even the saints seemed to sweat inside their wooden niches. He was a man of 60 years, with calloused hands that spoke of a youth spent among hoes before his religious vocation. "Daughter," he said, settling on the bench beside her, "I heard you're looking for a place to teach. Do you know Santa Rita Farm?" Maria Lucia raised her eyes from the missal. "I know the owner by name. José Antonio is a man of his word. If he promises a school, there will be a school, and God knows how those people need letters." 3 days later, Maria Lucia followed the dirt road that led to the farm, mounted on a gentle mare borrowed from Donna Benedita. The morning sun gilded the withered fields, and the air carried the sweet perfume of the last cashew trees in bloom. The big house of Santa Rita rose imposing in the middle of a swept yard, with a generous porch supported by Arrera wood columns. José Antonio waited for her in the shade, as if he knew she would come. "I brought a proposal," said Maria Lucia, dismounting with the gracefulness of someone who had learned to ride in the mountains of Minas. They walked to the abandoned mill, a construction of adobe and tiles that once ground sugarcane for rapadura and now housed only spider webs and the silence of dreams interrupted by drought. "Here," said José Antonio, pushing the heavy door. "If you can transform this into a school, the farm will provide whatever is needed." Maria Lucia entered the shadowy space, smelling the scent of old wood and beaten earth. She closed her eyes and could visualize rough Arrera benches, a blackboard made from an old cedar door painted with charcoal paint, children and adults bent over letters that would become words, words that would become worlds. "I accept," she said simply. Severino, the trusted foreman, was called to organize the collective work effort. He was a black man of 50 years, with scars on his hands that told stories of 15 years of loyalty to the farm. In 1 week, the old mill emerged as a school. In the first class at evening fall, when work in the fields allowed, 12 people came. Rita, a 35-year-old widow, was the first to trace her own name in the beaten earth floor with a stick. José Antonio watched from the porch of the big house, and Maria Lucia felt that gaze like a warm sun on her back, different from the sun that punished. It was a gaze that warmed without burning. But why did that silent man awaken in her an uneasiness she couldn't name? The weeks succeeded each other with the regularity of evening classes. Maria Lucia stayed in the village, at Donna Benedita's house, but spent her days at Santa Rita Farm, where the school in the old mill flourished like mandacaru cactus in a year of rain. José Antonio began to appear at classes, discreet, sitting on the porch steps from where he could hear the lessons. He never interfered, just observed with that silent attention that Maria Lucia was beginning to recognize as a mark of his personality. It was on a Friday afternoon, when the students had already left and the sun painted the sky in rosy tones, that he invited her to see the orchard. They walked among century-old cashew trees, their twisted trunks telling stories of droughts and winters. "My late wife liked to embroider here," said José Antonio, stopping under the generous shade of an especially leafy tree. "She said the cashew trees were like the people of the Sertão, twisted by life, but always bearing fruit." Maria Lucia touched the rough bark of the trunk, feeling the coarse texture under her fingers. "Was she very young when she passed?" 22 years old. "We dreamed," he hesitated, looking toward the horizon where the first stars were beginning to appear. "We dreamed of seeing a sun work this land." The silence that followed was dense like the air before a storm. Maria Lucia felt words rising up her throat like water from a deep well, loaded with a pain she herself could barely bear. "I know that pain," she finally said, "the pain that has no name or remedy." José Antonio turned to her, and for the first time Maria Lucia saw beyond courtesy and reserve. She saw a man who, like her, carried invisible wounds. I also lost something I never had," she completed, raising her eyes to the first stars. "In Minas, they said I was an incomplete woman, that my womb was dry land where nothing could grow." They remained side by side under the cashew tree, two castaways who had found debris from the same shipwreck. José Antonio pointed to a huazeiro tree planted among the cashews, newer than the other trees. Conceição planted that tree when she learned she was expecting. She said it would be for the boy to play in the shade. His voice carried a sweet melancholy, like the perfume of ripe cashews. Sometimes I think plants understand God's mysteries better than we do. Maria Lucia looked at the huasero, with its still young branches extended toward the starry sky, and felt something move in her chest, an emotion she couldn't name, but that warmed like embers at the end of the day. Could it be possible that two broken people could, together, form something whole? The letter arrived on an October morning, brought by the mail that passed through Villa de São Bento once a month. Donna Benedita delivered it to Maria Lucia with that discreet curiosity of country women who respect others' secrets but don't fail to notice them. Maria Lucia immediately recognized the small, careful handwriting of her sister Caterina. She tucked the correspondence into her dress pocket and only opened it later, in the solitude of the room she occupied in the shopkeeper's house. My dear sister, I write these lines with a heavy heart. Barnabe Machado married last Sunday to Isadora, daughter of Colonel Tiburcio. It was a grand celebration with a band and fireworks. Mother cried a lot, saying it should have been you at the altar. Maria Lucia folded the letter without finishing reading. The words mixed before her eyes like ink, blurred by rain. Barnabe Machado, the man who had promised to love her until death do us part, the same one who rejected her when he learned she would never give him heirs. That afternoon, in the old mill school, her hands trembled while she wrote on the improvised blackboard. The students noticed her distraction, but respected the teacher's silence as they respected the silence of sacred things. José Antonio appeared at the end of class, as had become his custom, but this time, instead of settling on the porch steps, he approached her. "You're not well," he said without beating around the bush. Maria Lucia tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "I received news from Minas, from the past I thought I had left behind." They walked to the orchard, where the perfume of ripe cashew trees hung in the air like incense. Maria Lucia then told about Barnabe, about the broken engagement, about the doctor who declared her sterility as if it were a death sentence. "They said I was like a tree that bears no fruit," she murmured, touching the bark of the oldest cashew tree. "That no man would want me knowing of my incompleteness." José Antonio remained silent for a long time, observing her with those eyes that seemed capable of seeing through appearances. "In the Sertão," he finally said, "we learn that the best trees are those that survive the hardest droughts. They're not always the ones that bear the most fruit, but those that offer the best shade." Maria Lucia felt tears roll down her face, tears she had kept for months, perhaps years. José Antonio offered her a handkerchief of rough cotton, smelling of lavender and sun. "I came to the Sertão to be a whole person again," she confessed, "to find a place where my worth wouldn't be measured only by my ability to bear children." "And did you find it?" he asked, his voice carrying a tenderness she didn't expect. Maria Lucia looked around, at the school where she taught, at the cashew trees preparing for a new flowering, at the man who listened without judgment. "I think so," she replied. "I think I finally found it." But was this feeling of belonging real, or just the calm before a new storm? November brought with it the first loaded clouds, still timid promises of a winter that might come. Maria Lucia had become part of Santa Rita Farm's routine, like the dew that kissed the earth in the cool dawns. The students of the old mill school could already read entire sentences, and Rita, the widow who had been the first to write her name, now helped the younger ones with the patience of someone who had discovered the liberating power of letters. It was on one of those afternoons when classes had ended and the last rays of sun gilded the orchard that Maria Lucia made a decision that would change both their destinies. She found José Antonio in the usual place, under the huasero planted by Conceição, where he used to stay when he needed to think. He was watering the young tree with precious water from the well, a gesture he repeated religiously every afternoon. "José Antonio," she said, and there was a new determination in her voice like metal tempered in fire. "I need to tell you something." He dropped the watering can and turned to her, noticing something different in her countenance. Maria Lucia took a deep breath like someone preparing to jump from a cliff. "I cannot give you a child of blood," she began, the words coming out clear and firm. "But I can be a mother to everything that needs care in this house. I can love this land as if I were born on it. I can honor Conceição's memory by putting down roots where she planted dreams." José Antonio remained motionless, his eyes fixed on her face, like someone trying to decipher an enigma. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibilities. "I learned that motherhood doesn't live only in the womb," continued Maria Lucia, now with tears flowing freely down her face. "It lives in the heart that gives itself, in the hands that care, in the voice that teaches and consoles. I can be a mother to the orphans who knock at your door, to the wounded cowboys, to dreams that haven't been born yet, but can be born. She extended her hands, palms up, in a gesture of total surrender. If you want to accept a woman who brings only love and willingness to work, here I am. José Antonio looked at the extended hands, small hands but calloused by work, hands that had held books and chalk, that had taught children to read, that trembled now with the courage of absolute vulnerability. I need 3 days, he finally said, his voice hoarse, to consult my conscience and the memory of the deceased. Maria Lucia nodded, understanding. She withdrew her hands and clasped them in front of her body, regaining her composure. I'll be in the village waiting for your answer. When she walked away, moving among the cashew trees with the dignity of a queen, José Antonio remained under the huazero until the first star appeared in the sky. Then he knelt beside the tree and murmured a prayer that no one else heard, directed to a woman who had left too early, and to a God who perhaps was offering a second chance to 2 wounded hearts. How would José Antonio respond to a proposal that could transform his life forever? The 3 days dragged on like an endless drought. Maria Lucia maintained her routine in the village, helping Donna Benedita in the store, visiting the sick with Father Francisco, teaching first letters to children who couldn't go to the farm. But her thoughts constantly flew to Santa Rita, like birds that always return to the same nest. On the morning of the 4th day, she found José Antonio waiting for her at the door of Donna Benedita's house. He was mounted on his bay horse, holding the reins of a gentle mare, the same one she used to ride to the farm. Come with me, he said simply. They rode in silence along the familiar road, but Maria Lucia perceived something different in the air, like the electricity that precedes a storm. José Antonio seemed more upright in the saddle, less bent by the weight of solitude. They stopped in the orchard under the huazero. The tree had grown a few centimeters in recent months, its branches extending with the confidence of things that know their place in the world. I spoke with Conceição, said José Antonio, dismounting slowly. Not in a dream, not in a vision. I spoke with her here where she planted this tree for the child she never got to see. Maria Lucia dismounted from the mare, her heart beating like a drum at a San Juan festival. And she reminded me of something I had forgotten, he continued, approaching the huazero. When she learned she was expecting, she said that God closes a door, but leaves a window open, that love always finds a way to continue. He turned to Maria Lucia, and she saw in his eyes a light that wasn't there 3 days before. I accept your proposal, he said, extending his hand. Not because I need someone to take care of the farm or the house. I accept because I recognize in you the same courage that brought Conceição from far away to marry me, the courage to love without guarantees. Maria Lucia took the extended hand, feeling the firmness of the calloused fingers, the honesty of skin, roughened by work. But there are conditions, said José Antonio, smiling for the first time since she had known him. The school will continue. The orphans who arrive will be our children, and this huazero will be protected until it becomes the largest tree in the sertão. I accept all conditions, replied Maria Lucia, and her voice was clear as spring water. They remained hand in hand under the huazero, while the first afternoon clouds formed on the horizon. It was December, and the air carried promises of rain. When? She asked. After the first rains, he said, so that our marriage begins with heaven's blessing. But before the rains came, destiny was preparing for them a test that would challenge both their faith in life itself. January 1882 arrived without the promised rains. The sky remained blue and implacable, and the farmers began to murmur about the possibility of a new drought. Maria Lucia noticed the growing concern in José Antonio's eyes, who spent hours watching the horizon in search of clouds that didn't come. It was on a Tuesday morning, while teaching addition in the old mill school, that Maria Lucia felt a sudden nausea. She attributed it to the excessive heat and the strong smell of improvised chalk, but the sensation repeated in the following days, always at the same time. Donna Benedita, who had eagle eyes for certain things, noticed when Maria Lucia refused breakfast for the 3rd time. Girl, said the shopkeeper, studying the teacher's pale face, when was your last woman's time? Maria Lucia stopped chewing the bread with rapadura. The question hit her like lightning on a clear day. She did the mental calculations, recounted, checked again. It can't be, she murmured, her voice trembling. It can, and must be, said Donna Benedita, with the wisdom of someone who had assisted more than 100 births. A woman's body doesn't lie. And you have all the signs. Maria Lucia felt the world spin around her. She leaned on the kitchen table, trying to absorb the possibility she had considered impossible for years. "But the doctors said—" "Doctors know about illness," replied Donna Benedita, preparing lemon balm tea. "Miracles are God's business." The news spread through the village like wind carrying seeds. Maria Lucia, the teacher who thought herself sterile, was expecting a child. In São Bento's chapel, women lit candles to Santa Rita, patroness of the impossible. José Antonio received the news on the porch of the big house when Maria Lucia went to the farm on an afternoon of overcast sky that finally promised rain. He listened to her in silence, his eyes fixed on her face like someone trying to understand a mystery. "Are you sure?" he finally asked. "Donna Benedita is sure," replied Maria Lucia. "And my body is changing." José Antonio rose from the rocking chair and walked to the porch railing. He remained there for long minutes, watching the dark clouds accumulating on the horizon. "Conceição," he murmured, so low that Maria Lucia almost didn't hear. "Conceição, could it be you interceding for us?" When he turned to Maria Lucia, she saw tears rolling down the deep furrows of his face. "Santa Rita," he said, his voice choked. "I'll have an oratory made for Santa Rita, patroness of the impossible." That night, the first drops of rain began to fall on the parched sertão. Maria Lucia was at Donna Benedita's house, drinking mint tea to calm her queasy stomach, when she heard the blessed sound of water touching the clay roof. The village women came out to doors and windows, extending their hands to receive the drops like blessings. And among them, Maria Lucia touched her still flat belly and smiled through her tears. Could it be possible that two miracles came together, the rain and the life growing inside her? January's rains brought more than relief to the parched earth. They brought revelations. With her stomach increasingly queasy and her body changing day by day, Maria Lucia needed to reveal to José Antonio a secret she had kept since arriving in the sertão. They met in the orchard on an afternoon when the rain had stopped falling, leaving the air clean and perfumed. The cashew trees sprouted new leaves, and Conceição's huazeiro seemed to have grown a full height overnight. "There's something I need to tell you," said Maria Lucia, her hands crossed over her belly. "About why I really came to the sertão." José Antonio listened to her in silence, while she spoke about the inheritance left by Godmother Rosa, a deed of perpetual rights over a water spring in lands near Diamantina, which had been given to her as a dowry, and which she had brought with her in the leather suitcase. "It's a small spring," she explained, taking the yellowed document from her dress pocket, "but it never dries up, not even in the most difficult years. Godmother Rosa said it was blessed water." José Antonio studied the document in the light filtering through the clouds. It was a legitimate deed, notarized, guaranteeing rights over a water source, treasure more valuable than gold in the sertão. "Why didn't you speak of this before?" he asked, without reproach in his voice. "Because I didn't want you to think I came looking for a husband out of interest," replied Maria Lucia, lowering her eyes. "I wanted to be accepted for who I am, not for what I bring." José Antonio carefully folded the document and returned it to her. "And now, what do you intend to do with this inheritance?" Maria Lucia looked around, at the land that was already beginning to green with the rains, at the big house where she hoped to live, at the old mill that had been transformed into a school. "I want to build a water tank here at Santa Rita," she said, her voice firm. "One that serves not just the farm but the entire region, so that water will never again be lacking for people or animals." Construction of the water tank began the following week. Master Inácio, an experienced mason from the village, commanded the collective effort that lasted 5 days. Men and women worked side by side, opening the well, laying the stones of the tank, building the structure that would last generations. Maria Lucia, even pregnant, supervised the work with the dedication of someone seeing a dream take shape. José Antonio watched amazed at that woman who seemed to grow in determination each day. On Sunday, Father Francisco blessed the work with holy water, and the water tank was opened for use by the entire community. The water flowed crystal clear and fresh, sufficient for people, animals, and crops. "Santa Rita water tank," announced José Antonio solemnly, baptizing the location. "From now on, this water belongs to whoever needs it." That night, while Maria Lucia rested in the room that would be hers after marriage, she felt the baby move in her womb for the first time. It was a gentle sensation, like a little fish swimming in calm waters. She touched her rounded belly and smiled. Miracles, she had discovered, didn't come alone. They came in floods that forever changed the landscape of life. But would the greatest miracle still be to come, testing the generosity of her heart? March arrived with abundant rains and two surprises that would forever change the course of Santa Rita Farm. The first was Raimundo, a 19-year-old orphan who appeared at the gate on a morning of thick fog, carrying only a bundle of clothes and eyes hollow with hunger. "I came from Canudos," he told José Antonio, who received him on the porch. "I heard that here there's no lack of work or food for those willing to labor." The second surprise arrived the same day. Chico, Raimundo's younger brother, only 17 years old, with the same determined look and the same hands calloused prematurely by necessity. Maria Lucia, who was at the school when the boys arrived, felt her heart tighten seeing them. She recognized in those young faces marked by struggle the same expression she saw in the mirror during difficult times in Minas Gerais. "You can stay," said José Antonio without hesitation. "There's room at Santa Rita for those who arrive with honesty." In the days that followed, the brothers proved their worth. Raimundo demonstrated natural talent with cattle, and Chico revealed himself to be a skilled carpenter. But it was in the old mill school that Maria Lucia saw the true miracle happen. Both boys, who had never set foot in a classroom, absorbed the lessons with the thirst of those who find water after a long journey. Raimundo learned to read with the determination of someone who sees in letters a bridge to a better future. Chico drew numbers in the beaten earth floor like someone drawing maps of dreams. "Teacher," said Raimundo one afternoon after the other students had left, "do you think that one day I'll be able to write my name on real paper?" Maria Lucia looked at that boy who could have been her son if life had followed other paths, and felt a tenderness that rivaled the maternal love growing in her womb. "Not just write," she replied, "but sign important documents, maybe even land deeds." José Antonio, who was listening to the conversation from the porch, entered the school and addressed the two brothers. "Raimundo, Chico," he said, his voice loaded with an emotion he rarely showed. "If you want, you can stop being just workers at Santa Rita. You can be sons of this house." The boy's eyes filled with tears. Chico was the first to speak, his voice choked. "Señor José Antonio, it would be an honor to carry the name of the family that welcomed us." "Then so be it," said José Antonio. "Raimundo Ferreira and Francisco Ferreira. These will be your names from today on." Maria Lucia, observing the scene with her hands over the belly where her child was growing, understood that she was witnessing the birth of a family built not just by blood, but by love and choice. That night, while rain drummed on the roof, she wrote in her diary, "I learned today that motherhood and fatherhood are rivers that flow in many directions. José Antonio didn't just accept me as a wife. He welcomed me as mother of the children that destiny sent us in different ways. But the challenges of forming an unconventional family were just beginning. How would the community react to these changes?" The wedding of Maria Lucia and José Antonio was set for the last Sunday of April, when she would complete 6 months of pregnancy, and the rains would diminish in intensity. São Bento's chapel had never seen such an anticipated celebration. The union of the teacher who had brought the miracle of water with the farmer, who had opened his house to drought's orphans. Donna Benedita commanded the preparations with a general's efficiency. Maria Lucia's dress was cut by her own hands in ivory satin, with long sleeves and a waist adjusted above the rounded belly. The veil had belonged to Donna Benedita's mother, kept in camphor for decades for special occasions. José Antonio had a new ring made for himself and reformed concessions for Maria Lucia, a gesture she interpreted not as lack of consideration, but as the first wife's blessing on the new matrimony. On the morning of the wedding, while dressing at Donna Benedita's house, Maria Lucia received an unexpected visit. Conceição das Dores, the widow who had previously courted José Antonio, appeared at the door with a package in her hands. "I came to bring this," she said, extending the package. Inside was a rosary of Aroeira wood, handcrafted with perfectly rounded beads. "It was my mother's," explained Conceição das Dores, her eyes moist. "She said it protected women during childbirth. I want you to have it." Maria Lucia accepted the gift with gratitude, understanding that this gesture represented more than reconciliation. It was recognition that true love rejoices in others' happiness, even when it renounces its own dreams. The ceremony took place at noon, with the chapel filled with simple people from the Sertão. Father Francisco conducted the Mass with the solemnity of great occasions, but it was during the vows that the most touching moment occurred. José Antonio, addressing Maria Lucia before the altar, spoke with a clear and firm voice. I promise to love you and the children God has given us, this one who is growing, and the two who have already come to us through life's paths. I promise that the water you brought will never be denied to those who need it." Maria Lucia responded with trembling hands over her belly. "I promise to honor Conceição's memory by caring for the land she loved. I promise to be mother to all the children who come to us, and guardian of the waters God entrusted to our hands." When Father Francisco declared them husband and wife, rain began to fall gently on the chapel roof like heaven's blessing. The bells rang, and the crowd exploded in celebration. The celebration continued at Santa Rita Farm, where long tables were set up under the porch expanded for the occasion. Raimundo and Chico, now officially Raimundo Ferreira and Francisco Ferreira, helped serve the guests with the pride of sons of the house. When the sun set, Maria Lucia and José Antonio walked to Conceição's Juazeiro, where the water tank reflected the first stars. He touched her belly, feeling the baby move. "Our family is complete," he said. "Not yet," replied Maria Lucia with a mysterious smile. "The most important thing is still missing." José Antonio looked at her, intrigued, but she just smiled and caressed the belly where the future was growing. What final surprise did Maria Lucia reserve for that family that destiny had united in such a singular way? June arrived with Maria Lucia's belly prominent like a full moon, and a decision maturing in her heart like fruit on the tree. The daughter, for Donna Benedita guaranteed it would be a girl, moved constantly, as if anxious to know the world that awaited her. Santa Rita's water tank had become a meeting point for the entire region. 3 neighboring villages sent their carts to fetch water during periods of greater drought, and José Antonio never denied the resource to anyone. But Maria Lucia observed and thought, observed and planned. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, when she felt the first spaced contractions that announced the proximity of birth, that Maria Lucia announced her most important decision. "I want to go to the notary office in Feira de Santana," she told José Antonio, who was resting on the porch after a day caring for cattle. "Now? With the child about to be born?" "That's exactly why," she replied, caressing her belly. "I want our daughter to be born knowing that her parents are not people who keep blessings to themselves." The following Saturday, in a cart adapted with mattresses to make the journey more comfortable, Maria Lucia went to Feira de Santana, accompanied by José Antonio and Donna Benedita. What she did at the notary office no one knew until weeks later. Rita was born on a July dawn, when the stars shone like diamonds over the Sertão. Donna Benedita delivered the baby with decades of experience, and the girl came into the world crying loudly, announcing that she had healthy lungs and a determined temperament. "She's just like her mother," said José Antonio, holding his daughter for the first time, already born commanding. But it was only when Rita completed 1 month that Maria Lucia revealed what she had done at the notary office. She gathered the whole family, José Antonio, Raimundo, Chico and the baby in her arms, on the porch of the big house. "There's a document you need to know about," she said, taking an official paper from her pocket. "It's the deed of perpetual donation of Santa Rita's water tank to the community of São Bento." José Antonio took the document with trembling hands. It was a formal donation, notarized, transferring rights over the water source for permanent community use. "Maria Lucia," he murmured, "this is worth a fortune." "It's worth more than a fortune," she replied, adjusting Rita in her arms. "It's worth the certainty that no child in this region will go thirsty, that no animal will die for lack of water, that no crop will be lost to drought." Raimundo and Chico looked at their stepmother with an admiration that bordered on reverence. They had never known anyone capable of giving up wealth in favor of strangers. "From today on," continued Maria Lucia, "this water is called People's Water Tank. It belongs to everyone and no one, like the rain that falls from the sky." José Antonio sat heavily in the rocking chair, absorbing the magnitude of his wife's gesture. In a few words, she had transformed her personal inheritance into a legacy for future generations. "And if someday we need this water just for ourselves," he asked, "then we'll be equal to everyone else," replied Maria Lucia, smiling. "And we'll learn that shared blessing is multiplied blessing." That night, while Rita slept in the crib built by Chico and José Antonio watched the stars from the porch, the first families arrived to thank for the donation. They came on foot, by cart, mounted on donkeys, bringing simple gifts: eggs, cheeses, fruits, hand-woven blankets. "Donna Maria Lucia," said an old cowboy, removing his leather hat, "you did what not even the government does for people. You gave free water to those who are thirsty." Maria Lucia received the thanks with the simplicity of someone who had merely fulfilled what she considered moral obligation, but José Antonio saw in her eyes a deep satisfaction, the peace of someone who had found their true purpose in life. Would this final gesture be the key to the immortality of their love story? October 1882 brought not only the first anniversary of Maria Lucia's arrival in São Bento, but also a revelation that would forever change the family's understanding of divine purposes. Rita, now 3 months old, was a happy baby who smiled at anyone, as if she brought with her the certainty that the world was a good place. Maria Lucia had recovered her strength from childbirth and returned to classes in the old mill school, where she now also taught Raimundo and Chico to do more complex calculations. It was on a Saturday afternoon, while the whole family rested on the porch after lunch, that Destiny's last gift arrived. 2 children appeared at the farm gate, boy and girl, orphaned siblings no more than 8 and 10 years old, thin as sticks but with eyes bright with hope. "We came from Colonel Tiburcio's farm," said the boy, who introduced himself as João. "He said that here you welcome those who have no family." The girl, named Rosa, clung to her brother with the determination of someone who learned early to protect what they love. José Antonio looked at Maria Lucia, who was nursing Rita in her arms, and saw on her face the same expression he had seen when Raimundo and Chico arrived. It was the look of a mother recognizing children she didn't yet know she had. "Of course you can stay," she said, passing Rita to José Antonio. "But first, let's take care of that hunger." While the children ate voraciously in the kitchen under Raimundo and Chico's care, Maria Lucia and José Antonio talked in the orchard under the huasiro that had now become an adult tree. "That's 6 children," said José Antonio, counting on his fingers. "Rita of blood, Raimundo and Chico of the heart, and now João and Rosa of Providence." "And it's not over yet," replied Maria Lucia, with that mysterious smile he had learned to recognize as an announcement of surprises. "How so?" Maria Lucia took her husband's hands and placed them over her still flat belly. "Donna Benedita confirmed yesterday. I'm expecting another child." José Antonio was struck dumb with surprise. He looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. This woman who had arrived in the Sertão thinking herself sterile and now announced her second biological child in less than a year. "Maria Lucia," he murmured, "you're not an ordinary woman. You're a walking miracle." "We are a miracle," she corrected. "I, you, our children, this land, this water. We're proof that God doesn't abandon those who have faith." That afternoon, while the children played in the yard and Rita slept in the hammock, Maria Lucia had a vision that changed her understanding of the entire journey. She saw herself as an old woman, sitting on the same porch, surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She saw the people's water tank serving a city that had grown around the old village of São Bento. She saw the old mill school transformed into a large college, with dozens of teachers trained by her disciples. She saw Raimundo as a prosperous farmer, Chico as a respected master carpenter, João as a doctor who cared for the poor for free, Rosa as a teacher who had brought education to the most distant sertões. She saw biological children who would come, 2 boys who would inherit the farm and take it into modern times. But above all, she saw Conceição's huasiro transformed into a giant tree, under whose shade entire generations would gather to hear the story of the teacher who brought water and the farmer who opened his heart. "José Antonio," she said, returning from the trance, "I want you to promise me something, anything. When I depart, I want to be buried under the huasiro, so that my grandchildren know where to find their grandmother when they need advice." José Antonio kissed her forehead, understanding that he was married not just to a woman, but to a force of nature that transformed everything it touched. "I promise," he said, "but we still have a lot of time ahead." "We have an eternity," agreed Maria Lucia, "because true love never dies. It just changes form." Was this vision a prophecy, or just the dream of a happy woman? December 1883 marked the 2nd anniversary of Maria Lucia and José Antonio's wedding, and Santa Rita Farm had transformed into a small, prosperous village. The big house had been expanded to accommodate the growing family, which now also included little Antonio, born in August, completing the prophecy of 7 children. The old mill school could no longer hold all the students. The Municipal Council of São Bento, recognizing the importance of education for the region, built its own building in the village and named Maria Lucia as official director. Raimundo and Chico, now 21 and 19 years old, had become her assistants, teaching arithmetic and notions of modern agriculture. João and Rosa, the last adopted orphans, flourished like well-cared-for plants. João demonstrated talent for studies and dreamed of becoming a doctor. Rosa followed in Maria Lucia's footsteps, teaching first letters to younger children with angelic patience. The people's water tank had become legend in the region. In drought years, families came from enormous distances to fetch water and never left empty-handed. José Antonio had ordered a shelter built near the spring, where travelers could rest and eat without payment. It was on a Christmas Eve afternoon, when the whole family gathered on the porch to share dinner, that Maria Lucia made her last great announcement. "There's something you need to know," she said, holding Antonio in her arms, while Rita, now a year and a half old, played at her feet. About the future of this family and this land. José Antonio, perceiving the solemnity in his wife's tone, called everyone's attention. Raimundo, Chico, João and Rosa approached, forming a circle around their parents. "I've written a will," announced Maria Lucia, "not because I intend to leave early, but because true love plans beyond its own existence." She explained her dispositions. Santa Rita Farm would be divided equally among all children, biological and adopted without distinction. The school would remain as family patrimony, with the obligation to keep it always open for whoever wanted to learn. The people's water tank would continue forever, under the Ferreira family's protection. "But there's one condition," she said, her gaze traveling over each beloved face. "This family must remain united. You can marry, have your own children, follow different destinies. But once a year at Christmas, everyone must gather under Conceição's Juazeiro to renew the bonds that unite us." "And if someday someone needs help?" asked Rosa, the youngest. "Then the whole family mobilizes," replied José Antonio, understanding his wife's wisdom. "Because we learned that shared blessing is multiplied blessing." Years passed like flowing water. Maria Lucia and José Antonio aged together, seeing children marry, grandchildren be born, the region modernize. The railroad arrived, bringing progress. São Bento's college became a reference throughout the Sertão. The people's water tank now supplied a prosperous city that had grown around the old village. In 1920, when Maria Lucia completed 65 years, her white hair shone like silver under the Sertão sun. Sitting on the porch of the big house, surrounded by 15 grandchildren, she always told the same story, how a teacher who thought herself incomplete found in the Sertão not just a husband, but an entire family and a purpose that transcended her own existence. "Grandma," asked one of the grandchildren on a Sunday afternoon, "why did you donate the water instead of selling it?" Maria Lucia looked at Conceição's Juazeiro, now a majestic tree that covered half the yard with its generous shade. "Because I discovered the secret of true wealth, my child," she replied, her voice still firm at 65 years old. "It's not what we keep for ourselves that makes us rich. It's what we give that makes us immortal." José Antonio, sitting beside her in the rocking chair, took her wrinkled hand and kissed it gently. "We weren't broken people," he murmured, repeating the words she had written in her diary decades before. "We were chosen vessels to receive double blessing." The sun set over Santa Rita Farm, tinting the sky gold and red. In the people's water tank, water continued to flow crystal clear, as on the first day. And under the Juazeiro planted by Conceição, the Ferreira family renewed once more the pact of love that transcended blood, time, and death. There, in that blessed piece of Sertão, two wounded souls had discovered that true love doesn't just heal, it transforms everything it touches into eternal legacy. The story of Maria Lucia and José Antonio continues living in the heart of those who believe that love, when true, has the power to transform not just two lives, but entire generations. In the Sertão of Bahia, where water is more precious than gold, they proved that the greatest wealth lies in giving, and that family is built not just with blood, but with daily choices to love and welcome.